Welcome back to The Heat. Pakistan and India have fought 3 wars since gaining independence from Great Britain in 1947, 2 over Kashmir. And tensions escalated again this weekend, the Kashmir region, when soldiers exchanged gunfire, killing at least 4 civilians. India also called off diplomatic talks with Pakistan after the Pakistani ambassador met with separatist leaders from the disputed region. Can the 2 nuclear-armed neighbours find compromise? We continue our discussion with Ambassador Hussain Haqqani, scholar Farah Ispahani, and Dr. Joshua White, the Deputy Director of the South Asian Programme at the Stimson Centre. Thanks. India, of course, is key to any decisions internally in Pakistan and outwardly. Given the tensions that we're seeing, Ambassador, first, what's going on here with cross-border relations?
Well, first of all, India does not want to engage in talks with a weak civilian government, especially one that cannot have full control over foreign policy. Initially, Prime Minister Modi, upon his election, invited Prime Minister Sharif, gave the signal that we are in business, we want to talk. But then you must remember, in 1999, Mr. Modi's predecessor, Prime Minister Vajpayee, traveled to Pakistan after the nuclear tests of both countries and tried to build a process. And that was undermined by the military operation in Kargil, which was initiated by General Musharraf, who eventually took over and ruled for 10 years. So what Mr. Modi wanted to signal by cancelling the talks is that, look, we are willing to talk, but the talks cannot be purely on Pakistan's terms as a PR exercise. They have to have some substantive result. And one of those results should be a de-escalation of terrorism, which India says emanates from Pakistan. So the internal chaos in Pakistan is playing into the situation because it makes the Prime Minister look weak. It makes the army stronger in terms of holding back Mr. Sharif from making any overtures to India that the army does not approve of. And we are back to square one in India-Pakistan relations.
Do you think the problems actually empower the army's view of what's happening in Pakistan?
Absolutely. As Ambassador Haqqani mentioned, it's back to square one. All of the work that, Mr. Nawaz Sharif coming in with such a big mandate interested Mr. Modi in India that, oh, this is a strong Prime Minister in Pakistan that we can talk to, do business with. And we started talking about things which interested common Pakistanis and common Indians, which was trade. Because
there's an economic aspect here too.
Absolutely. And, you have a lot of things in India and Pakistan where if you can just export things across the border, the costs are so much more competitive. They're huge markets for each other. And in fact, it's more favorable for Pakistan than for India. So basically, the army's stubbornness in this anti-India thing, which has just lost us wars, Pakistan's never won a war with India. So the economic war, which we were going to move forward with, even people like myself who have sat in opposition to Mr. Nawaz Sharif in Parliament, agreed that for Pakistan, he was taking the right step. So, the India-Pakistan trade, to me, the economic angle, and then the instability, Iran doesn't want to invest anymore. China, who've been very, very good in recent years. In the last 5 years, there was a lot of investment by China and Pakistan in our coal mines, etc. I have a feeling, seeing all this instability, the Chinese who've been such good friends, as we call them, it's an all-weather friendship in Pakistan, that the Chinese also are not going to want to invest in such an unstable country.
Joshua, obviously the cross-border issue is paramount in terms of regional stability, but there's also the US angle here. They're a big donor to the Pakistani government. A lot of that, of course, is based on constitutional law, democracy. Could we see aid to Pakistan threatened here?
Absolutely, we could. The Congress right now is focused on other parts of the world. They're focused on what's happening with the rise of the Islamic State in the Middle East. They're going to be focused on the upcoming midterm elections. But that means that it's all the harder for Pakistan to make its case that the aid dollars, in terms of economic aid and military assistance, are a good use of U.S. taxpayer funds, particularly if there is an overt military coup. But even if the military moves to dismiss the parliament by sort of backhanded means, there will be serious questions here in Washington about how much money should be going to Pakistan, how much support, and whether those dollars could be better used addressing other top-line national security concerns.
Pakistan is already under an IMF program.
Yes.
Pakistan has received a large chunk of money from IMF to stabilize its economy. Very frankly, the targets for that were being met until recently. But these last 2 weeks have disrupted those targets. Mr. Imran Khan has called upon his followers not to pay taxes, for example. Pakistan already collects a lot less taxes than it ought to. So all of this could also threaten the IMF program. The rupee has tumbled considerably in its in the exchange markets. The Karachi stock market, which was doing very, very well, has also come under a lot of pressure. And as Farah said, there will be people who would be reconsidering their investments because nobody wants to invest in a country where the only thing that's being discussed is potential riots in the streets and the potential resignation of the Prime Minister.
There's also regional stability at stake here. Farah, this comes at a time when the Americans are desperate to draw down out of Afghanistan and they want a stable Pakistan. What's going on here? What are the regional dynamics considering the political upheaval in Pakistan just as Afghanistan needs regional stability?
I think that, unfortunately, and I agree with Joshua, that the US Congress may do something very drastic as a result of all of this. And I think
what should the US be doing here? Because they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. You know, they have influenced Pakistani politics. Some would say they emboldened the armed forces. What should they be doing here? They want to get out, but they also don't want to leave a mess.
Well, I think they did the right thing. The message that came out of the US Embassy publicly was that, you know, we recognize the constitutionally elected Prime Minister, and I think that was the right message. But I don't think the United States is in any hurry to, you know, get re-involved with Pakistan or the region. They
Josh,
really
do you think that's right? They want to move on?
There's a strong political incentive to focus on other parts of the world, to declare the war in Afghanistan to be done and to draw down, over time, aid to Pakistan. At the same time, there's a very clear realization in Washington that we shouldn't repeat the mistakes of the 1990s, when after the Cold War changed our geopolitical calculation, we withdrew nearly all support from Pakistan and have paid the price for it.
Washington but we have Islamic State in Syria, in Iraq, the Taliban in Pakistan, let alone the Taliban in Afghanistan, is unsolved issues. So if they do pull back, we could see a repeat of the 1990s, are you saying?
Well, I don't think that the Americans are going to completely withdraw, and I'm sure that Joshua will agree with me on that.
He's nodding, so.
Because the fact of the matter is that Pakistan's stability is critical to stability of the wider region.
It's a nuclear power.
It's a nuclear power. It sits at the cusp of the Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia. India is interested in Pakistan's stability as well. That said, what I'm expecting is, while the Americans will continue to be helpful to Pakistan, the situation in Pakistan will not be helpful to Americans being helpful.
Josh?
I think that's true. You know, people in Washington are famously short-sighted, but many of them are looking 1 or 2 years down the line, 2015 and 2016, when the U.S. presence is going to be diminishing across the border in Afghanistan. The funds to the Afghan government from international donors are much more uncertain. And there's a period of concern, a period of uncertainty. And what Washington would like would be to have a relatively stable civilian government in Pakistan with a military that it can also work with. And if things go south in Pakistan, I don't expect the U.S. would cut off all assistance and all support, but it would make it much harder to build a functional relationship, which is the very low bar that everyone today essentially aspires to.
All of you, just quickly, what role can China play here?
I think that China remains Pakistan's most respected friend. And I think China's real strength comes from the fact that it has never, ever got involved in Pakistan's domestic politics one way or the other. China's real role here is to continue to reassure Pakistanis that as a nation, Pakistan is not going to be alone in the world. Pakistan is not going to be totally isolated. And then continue to encourage Pakistan's leading power centers, the military, the civilians, the various political factions, to recognize and understand that there are limits to what China can do to help Pakistan. In the end, Pakistanis also have to step up to the plate, to use a baseball analogy while talking about a cricketer.
Laura?
Well, I'm just going to jump in and say this. The other thing we have to recognize, terrorism in Pakistan domestically has got out of hand. And you see it with the religious minorities in Pakistan, you see it with ordinary citizens, you see bomb blasts all the time. It's a very bad and out of control situation. And a lot of those jihadi elements in Pakistan have been recently, the Chinese for the first time have come out and talked about situations in Xinjiang, etc., that there may be a Pakistani connection. So it may be useful for stability in Pakistan also, for the Chinese-Pakistani relationship, for the Pakistani army to realize these jihadi groups have got to be dealt with, not just for Pakistan, but for China, because will China stay Pakistan's all-weather friend?
So I'd like to bring this up with Josh. You can see, like the Americans had cooperated in the past over the threat of terrorism, you can see Beijing and Islamabad cooperating against a joint terrorism threat in the future, and that's cementing the relationship?
Absolutely, and I think this is, in fact, a case where the United States and China and Pakistan have very shared interests. I know that China has been more concerned about some of the groups that are based in Pakistan. And this is an area for cooperation. Similarly, in the economic sector, China has a great deal of investment in Pakistan, and they're the ones who can most effectively communicate to the Pakistanis what weeks and weeks of protests that clog the streets and that have an impact on the stock market will do to the prospect of foreign investment from China and everywhere else. China can communicate that message in a way that other countries, including the United States, simply can't.
Joshua, I want to thank you all for a very stimulating discussion. It's been absolutely fascinating.